Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Battles of the American Civil War, which hosts Bang and Dang, and we are exactly three episodes out after this one from the Battle of Chancellorsville, which is going to be a nice bloody battle and a world-famous death at the hands of his own people. Such a damn shame, ain't it? Casualties of war, is that what they say? Sure. We got 4 battles for you today, and one of them is decent. The other 3 are literally like 2 paragraphs. We got the Battle of Brentwood, the Battle of Washington, the first Charleston Harbor battle, and the Battle of First Franklin. Brentwood's up first, March 25th, 1863 in Williamson County, Tennessee. Union Lieutenant Colonel Edward Bloodgood held Brentwood, which was a station on the Nashville and Decatur Railroad, with 400 men on the morning of March 25th, 1863. And when Confederate Brigadier General Nathan Bedford Forrest approached the town with a powerful column, he's like, Nathan Bedford Forrest. Well, the day before, Forrest had ordered Colonel James Starnes, commanding the 2nd Brigade, to go to Brentwood, cut the telegraph, tear up the railroad track, attack the stockade, and cut off any retreat. Forrest and the other cavalry brigade made contact with Bloodgood about 7 a.m. on March 25th. Messenger from the stockade informed Bloodgood that Forrest's men were about to attack and had destroyed the railroad tracks. Well, Bloodgood sought to notify his superiors and discovered that the telegraph lines were cut. He's like, oh shit, what do we do now?
All right.
Guess we gotta stand our ground, boys.
Stand your ground, boys. Forrest sent in a demand for surrender under a flag of truce, but Bloodgood said no. Within a half hour, Forrest had artillery placed to shell Bloodgood's position and had surrounded the Federals with a large force. Look at that. The Confederates actually doing something. Bloodgood surrendered.
He's like, damn it. I guess.
Forrest and his men caused considerable damage during this expedition, and Brentwood, Tennessee, on the railroad was a significant loss to the Feds.
Yeah, you can't be losing no railroad spots, man.
No.
Well, Johnson Chapel Road, along which General Forrest led his men to battle from the west, had been renamed Maryland Way. As of today, the approach would have started at the modern-day intersection of Maryland Way and High Lee Road in the River Oak subdivision. Wow. The troops proceeded east to what is now Franklin Road and Church Street. The other Confederate brigade approaching from the east under Colonel James Wellborn Starnes established their position on a nearby hill, which is currently the Hilton Suites on Church Street.
Fantastic.
Most of the battle took place around what is now the Shell gas station on the northwest corner of Franklin Road and Old Hickory Boulevard.
So if you get gas at about 1 in the morning and some freaky shit happens, that's the Rebs.
Right. Well, that'd be the I don't think nobody died.
All right.
Maybe. I don't know.
Doesn't say.
Oh, they just put the artillery in place and didn't do nothing. And Bloodgood's like, damn, we got to surrender.
Well, there's that. Moving on, Battle of Washington took place March 30th to the 19th of April, 1863 in Beaufort County, North Carolina.
North Carolina.
This was General Longstreet's of the Confederates' Tidewater operations. This battle was sometimes referred to as the Siege of Little Washington. After the culmination, I think I like Battle of Washington better. After the culmination of Burnside's North Carolina expedition, little attention had been given to North Carolina by Confederate forces. In December 1862, a Union expedition from New Bern destroyed the railroad bridge, which is the Goldsboro Bridge, at Goldsboro, North Carolina, along with vital Wilmington and Weldon Railroad. Man, blowing up that damn railroad. So hard to. Took all those years to put that in just to blow it up and then have to fix it again.
And then they have to fix it if they want it.
Right. This expedition caused only temporary damage on the railroad, but did prompt Confederate authorities to devote more attention to the situation along the coast of Virginia and Carolina.
All right. Well, following the Confederate victory at Fredericksburg, Robert E. Lee felt confident enough to dispatch a large portion of his army to deal with Union occupation forces along the coast.
Yeah, he was feeling good. He was like, look what we just did there. We can do things on the coast.
I bet you right now the Confederates firmly think that they are about to win this war, dude.
Are winning.
Every major battle they've won so far.
It's true.
Pretty much. The whole force was put under command of Lieutenant General James Longstreet.
Right.
While Longstreet personally operated against Suffolk, Major General D.H. Hill led a column which moved against federal garrisons at New Bern and Washington, North Carolina. Major General John Foster from the Union side, he commands the Department of North Carolina, was responsible for the overall defense of the Union garrisons along the North Carolina coast.
All right.
After Hill's attack against New Bern failed, Foster arrived in Washington to take personal command of the garrison. He said, I got it.
I got it. Foster, a West Point-trained Army engineer, put his skills to good use, improving the town's defenses, as well as employing the use of 3 gunboats in the defense. By March 30th, the town was ringed with the fortifications. Brigadier General Richard B. Garnett's brigade began the investment of Washington.
He's like, we need it. He's like, this guy just built us a bunch of defenses for this town. We gotta take it over now.
We gotta go take it. Meanwhile, Hill established batteries as well as a river obstructions along the Tar River to impede reinforcements for the Union. He also posted 2 brigades south of Washington to guard for any relief efforts coming overland from New Bern. He's like, wherever the Yankees are coming from, we got them. Confederates sent a message to Foster demanding surrender. Foster replied saying, if the Confederates sent Washington, come and get it. Nope. If the Confederates want Washington, come and get it.
Well, I think they want it, so they're going to come and get it.
Like, we don't want that Washington. We want the other one.
All right. Despite this defiance, Foster lacked the strength to dislodge the besiegers. Hill was under orders to avoid an assault at the risk of sustaining heavy casualties, though. Thus, the engagement devolved into one of artillery, and even so, the Confederates limited their fire to conserve their ammo.
Yeah.
In time, both sides were running low on supplies, and conditions grew miserable in the rain and mud.
Yeah.
Despite the lack of progress... Despite the lack of progress against Washington, Hill was accomplishing a vital objective in the form of foraging parties. So as long as the Federals were pinned down,
right?
He's like, we can go and take a bunch of stuff.
Damn right we can. Let's do it. A Federal relief column under Brigadier General Henry Prince sailed up the Tar River. Once Prince saw the rebel batteries, he simply turned around. He's like, "Yeah, roadblock guys.
Right.
There's an accident up front. Let's take another route." A second effort under Brigadier General Francis Barreto Spinola moved overland from New Bern. Spinola was defeated along Blunt's Creek and returned to New Bern. He's like, that's not a good way either.
Like, anymore?
Right. Foster decided that he would escape Washington and personally lead the relief effort, leaving his chief and staff, Brigadier General Edward E. Potter, to die.
No.
He left him in command at Washington. April 13th, the USS Escort braved the Confederate batteries and made its way into Washington.
Well, at least somebody's got some balls.
Just forced their way in. The Escort delivered supplies and reinforcements in the form of a Rhode Island regiment. It was aboard this ship on April 15th that Foster made his escape. He said, hey, whatever, I don't care about the reinforcements. I'm still getting out of here. Who's the other guy that kept on running away? McClellan?
All of them.
All right. The ship was badly damaged and the pilot mortally wounded, but Foster made it out. Sure he did.
Well, about the same time Foster made an escape, Hill was faced with numerous reasons that ultimately led to his withdrawal. The completion of his foraging efforts, Union supplies reaching the Federal garrison, and
right there.
Finally a message arrived from Longstreet requesting reinforcements for an assault on Suffolk.
Right.
Hill broke off the siege on April 15th and began to withdraw Garnett's brigade fronting Washington's defenses. Meanwhile, Foster had made it back to New Bern and immediately began organizing a relief effort. He ordered General Prince to march along the railroad towards Kingston to hold off Confederates in the vicinity of Goldsboro, while Foster personally led a second column north from New Bern towards Blunt's Creek, where General Spinola had early been turned back.
All right.
Okay, he's going to go back in the city. They're gone now.
April 18th, Foster orders Spinola to drive the Confederates from their roadblock at Swift Creek, guarding the direct road from Washington to New Bern. At the same very time, General Henry M. Nagley attacked the Confederates' rear guard near Washington, capturing several prisoners and a regimental battle flag. Uh-oh. That's like knocking a man's hat off. On April 19th, Foster returned to Washington defenses. And by the 20th of April, the Confederates had completely withdrawn from the area. Little did they know they were leaving anyway.
Right.
Apart from raids conducted by Foster and Potter, North Carolina remained relatively quiet until 1864, when Robert E. Lee was able to spare troops for another operation against Federal control posts along the coast.
He's desperate then.
All right.
Well, it moves us on to the First Battle of Charleston Harbor, which was an engagement near Charleston, South Carolina, that took place April 7th. The striking force was a fleet of 9 ironclad warships of the Union Navy, including 7 monitors that were improved versions of the original USS Monitor. A Union Army contingent associated with the attack took no active part in the battle.
None.
Said, we don't need you.
All right.
The ships under command of Rear Admiral Samuel Francis DuPont attacked the Confederate defenses near the entrance to the Charleston Harbor.
All right. Well, the war was not going very well for Union in late 1862 and early 1863.
It was not.
Lincoln was feeling the heat from the nation. The people were getting a little concerned. They're like,
And all the Democrats are like, we told you you guys shouldn't have elected this idiot.
Right.
He's losing us the war.
Although the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia had been repulsed at Antietam, it had escaped intact and had inflicted a major defeat on the Federal Army of Potomac at Fredericksburg, following which the Army of Potomac was in disarray. In the West, the campaign for control of the Mississippi River seemed to be bogged down before Vicksburg. That's in Mississippi.
Obviously.
The Confederates had actually managed to retake Galveston, Texas.
Yeah.
A mood of war weariness was evident throughout the North, and the fall elections, regarded as a referendum on the war, had shown a swing away from the Republican Party. They're like, well, maybe those Southern Democrats were right. Can we succeed now? The Lincoln administration therefore began to apply great pressure on its field commanders to achieve some success that would lift the national spirits and Lincoln's poll numbers.
How many times does he have to say this to these people?
Right. I mean, he was doing pretty good when he was making decisions. Now he's letting Halleck do it.
I don't think he was doing pretty good at all.
No. It was in this atmosphere that the Navy Department began to urge an attack on Charleston. He was like, we can do it without the help of the Army.
Right.
We can do it.
We'll try. Charleston 1883 was already of only limited military significance, as the active centers of combat were mostly in Virginia and the interior of the country. Right, they didn't really care about the coast too much.
No.
I mean, what are they going to do?
Right.
Its value as a port for blockade runners was not much greater than that of Mobile, Alabama, or Savannah, Georgia,
Right.
and already eclipsed by Wilmington, North Carolina.
Exactly.
However, it is selected as a target more for symbolic worth than for strategic importance,
Right.
where we all know Fort Sumter is located here. And in the mind of the public of the North and South, Fort Sumter was the citadel of the fortress, the incarnation of the rebellion, and as such, it was attacked and defended.
Right.
Yeah, that would have been a nice little morale booster to get Fort Sumter back, though.
That would have been great. Among the most vocal proponents of the attack was Assistant Secretary of the Navy Gustavus Vasa Fox. Fox had an ulterior motive, though, in that he wanted the Navy to be free from domination by the Army. He's like, we got all for you, bud, but we don't want anything to do with those land dwellers. He was therefore not disturbed when General-in-Chief Henry Halleck would not agree to a major part for the Army in operation.
He's like, that's literally what I wanted, but I had to ask.
Halleck was willing to commit only 10,000 to 15,000 untrained soldiers. He was like, I'll give you these guys. They don't even know how to load a gun. And who would exploit any success made by the naval force, but would not otherwise have an active role.
Right. They'd go in the town afterwards and pillage.
Right.
The Navy Department supported the operation by assigning almost all of its armored vessels to the South Atlantic Blockading Squadron, commanded by Rear Admiral DuPont. These included the massive USS New Ironsides, which New Ironsides would serve as DuPont's flagship.
Nice.
The Passaic-class gunboats were designed as improved versions of the original USS Monitor. As they were commissioned, they were sent to South Carolina, so 7 of them were able to participate in the attack. In addition, the experimental armored gunboat Keokuk was added to the fleet.
Fantastic. DuPont did not share the enthusiasm of the Navy Department for the armored vessels, although they could withstand whatever punishment the coastal artillery of the day could give them. Their offensive capabilities were severely restricted, though.
Yeah.
New Ironsides carried 16 guns, broadside only, and 8 on each side. But each of others carried 2 only guns. Only 2 guns, 2 only guns. Onlyguns.com. Each Passaic had one 15-inch and one 11-inch gun, while Keokuk carried 2 11-inch guns. So they had very little very little firepower on these guns.
Well, although they were larger than a typical 32-pounder weapons that would be used against them, the rate of fire was much less.
Right.
7 minutes needed to swab, reload, and aim between shots. Wow. Despite his lack of faith in the monitors, DuPont did not propose any alternative plans to capture Charleston. He's like, well, I guess this have to do.
Right.
He concentrated instead how to preserve his ships. His defeatism must be taken into account in any reckoning of the results of the battle.
Damn right. Got to do what we got to do. Let's go in there and do it.
Defeatism.
General PGT Beauregard, commanded the Confederate Department of the South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, as he had led the rebel forces at Charleston at the time of the bombardment of Fort Sumter at the opening of the war. He was intimately familiar with the fortifications surrounding this city. He had been called away to service elsewhere, but returned back in September of 1862. The batteries that had been set up under his supervision to assault the fort were incorporated into the harbor defenses.
Of course.
His successors, Major General John C. Pemberton and Brigadier General Roswell S. Ripley, made some additions in the year and a half that he was gone. But the basic features were due to Beauregard.
All right. The fortifications that had been set up around the harbor were well suited to repel attacks from the ocean. The most seaward guns were placed in Battery Wagner, often referred to in Union accounts as Fort Wagner, and Battery Gregg, both on Morris Island. Near them, on a man-made island on the same side of the harbor, was Fort Sumter. Fort Moultrie and its outlying batteries lay across the harbor on Sullivan's Island. These formed the first or outer defensive ring. The second ring consisted of Fort Johnson and Battery Glover on James Island and Fort Ripley and Castle Pinckney in the harbor. Finally, the White Point Battery at the southern end of the city itself. And then a third ring, formed of several batteries on the Cooper and Ashley rivers and in Charleston, was intended to protect against land assault in the city. In all, they mounted some 385 land-based guns.
The defense also included shipping barriers spanning the harbor. First to be put in place was a row of piles that stretched from Fort Johnson near Fort Ripley in middle ground. This proved to be ineffective as storms and strong tides soon ripped out major sections. Later, a boom was laid between Fort Sumter and Moultrie, formed by about 20 feet lengths of railroad tie, floated by large timbers, bound together by chains and anchored at intervals. This barrier also broke under the strain imposed by the tides. People didn't realize how powerful water was, huh?
All right.
It was supplemented by a rope obstruction that was meant to foul the propellers of enemy vessels. Okay. Get those propellers, baby. Despite the effort that went into these barriers, the defenders did not believe them to be serious impediments.
Well, the same was true of most of the torpedoes, which are actually mines, that were laid. DuPont was unaware of their flaws, so the barriers and torpedoes were major concerns in its preparations for the battle. South also had a naval contingent present. 2 armored gunboats, the CSS Chicora and the Palmetto State, were ready to fight if the invaders neared the city. They would be used only reluctantly, though, as they were known to be too slow to pose a significant threat to the northern monitors.
All right, can do anything.
All right, well, last chance. Once they get into that inner ring, then you got your ships, I guess, but hopefully it doesn't come to that.
Right. The defenses before Charleston were strong, but Beauregard knew they had to prepare for the Weist. Thus, shortly after he resumed his command, he made the potentially fateful decision to defend the city street by street if necessary. He wrote to Governor Francis W. Pickens to stay his position, and it says, "As I understand, it is the wish of all people in government that the city shall be defended to the last extremity."
The shitty shall be defended.
The shitty city.
All right. DuPont chose to mount the attack in the early part of April in order to take advantage of the spring tides brought by the full moon. As the date was nearing, a new device was introduced by the Navy Department. Because of DuPont's often expressed fears of torpedoes in the harbor, the department had called on the man who designed the monitors, John Erickson, and they said, "Hey, man, we need you to provide some means of defense." We came up with a raft-like structure made up of heavy timbers that could be attached to a ship's bow.
Hey.
Each raft carried grappling hooks intended to snag the mooring lines of enemy torpedoes.
Got a feeling that's not going to work.
Right.
It also carried its own torpedo, so it could blast its way through the obstructions. 2 of the rafts were built and sent down to South Carolina in time for the attack. After considering the steering and handling problems the rafts would introduce, DuPont's captains were unwilling to mount them on their ships. They're like, no. Torpedo was particularly worrisome, as collisions between ships in the narrow channel with unknown currents could be expected.
Right.
And you want us to blow ourselves up? Only one captain, John Rogers, was like, "I'll do it. Though we Hawken will lead the way." He was like, "I'll do this shit. I'll strap those rafts on my ship. And then only without the torpedoes, though. Don't you bring no torpedoes by me." In the event, the motion of the raft pounded his ship so severely that Rogers decided to cast it loose before it had cleared any enemy torpedoes.
Man, he's like, "Fuck this. This is a terrible design, dude."
Baya.
Well, the fleet assembled off the mouth of the harbor on April 5th. On that day, DuPont sent the buoy schooner USS Admiral DuPont and the survey vessel Bibb, with 2 B's, accompanied by Keokuk, to mark the entrance channel with buoys. Weather on the following day was hazy, making navigation difficult, so DuPont postponed it for another day.
Right.
He said another day. The harbor was obscured by haze again on the morning of April 7th, but it cleared up by noon, and the signal to attack was given. He said, "Go get 'em, boys."
Right. 4 monitors led the way. First was the USS Weehawken, under Captain John Rogers.
Right.
Getting underway, Weehawken's anchor fouled by the grappling hooks on the torpedo raft, delayed in the start by about an hour. She then could make only 3 knots, and the rest of the column had to follow at her slow pace.
Yeah, pretty slow.
Second was the Passaic, commanded by Charleston native Captain Percival Drayton. Third was the Montauk, led by Commander John L. Worden. Worden was famed as the captain of the USS Monitor when she engaged CSS Virginia at the Battle of Hampton Roads. Next came Patapsco, under command Daniel Ammon. These were followed by flagship New Ironsides, commanded by Commander Thomas Turner. Also aboard were Rear Admiral DuPont and his fleet captain Christopher Raymond Perry Rogers. That's a hell of a name.
Well, then came 3 more monitors, the Catskill under Commander George W. Rogers, brother of CRP Rogers and cousin of John.
That's it.
The Nantucket under Commander Donald M. Fairfax, and the Nahant under Commander John Downs. Experimental non-monitor ironclad Keokuk, commanded by Commander Alexander Rhine, was at the end of the line.
Look at that shit.
Almost 2 hours elapsed between the time the ships got underway until the opening shots were fired. Well, it's probably because you're going 3 knots.
All right.
In that time, they found that the New Ironsides had severe handling problems
No shit.
in the strong current and shallow water. She was forced to stop and anchor to avoid going aground just about the time the lead monitors were coming under fire.
Uh-oh. She dropped out of line, and the 4 ships following her passed around with some difficulty. The waiting rebels could not have chosen a better place for New Ironsides to anchor, as she was directly over a 3,000-pound electrically charged torpedo.
Wow.
That would be activated by closing a switch on the shore. Their high hopes were dashed, however, when the switch was closed and nothing happened. They're like,
The hell, man?
2 explanations for the failure had been offered. According to one, the ordnance wagon had broken the wires by being driven over them. Possible. The other holds that the wires were simply too long, so the electric current would not be great enough to pass to make a great spark to detonate the charge, which is most likely the case.
Meanwhile, the other ships were being pummeled. The Weehawken had advanced to a line of buoys that Captain Rogers thought might mark torpedoes, so he swerved from the channel and stopped to consider what to do next. At this time, an underwater explosion rocked the vessel.
Uh-oh.
Rogers thought that it was a torpedo, but some historians believe that it was more likely the explosion of a shell from one of the forts.
Really?
In either case, ship suffered no significant injury. Because she had left the channel, however, the line of ships following her were thrown into confusion.
Right.
Whatever was left of DuPont's battle plan collapsed.
It did.
The intense fire the ships received from the forts kept them farther from Fort Sumter than the Admiral had envisioned, so their return fire was less accurate than planned. Like this dude, everything's just falling apart for you there, DuPont.
Right. It was not accuracy that determined the result, however, but the sheer disparity in firepower. In the course of 2 hours of the engagement, the Confederate forces got off more than 2,000 shots and shells, of which 520 hit.
Jeez.
By contrast, the Union fleet fired only 154 shots. Their armor protected the crews, but several ships suffered damage that impaired their fighting abilities, such as jam turrets and gun port stoppers. Worst hit was Keokuk, which was hit 90 times, including 19 shots at or below the waterline. Captain Rind withdrew his ship from the fight, barely able to keep her afloat until she was beyond enemy gunfire. By this time, the tide had turned. So Admiral DuPont decided to suspend the attack until the following day.
Jeez.
So it ain't working out today, boys.
Right. Well, DuPont, in his official report, asserted that he fully intended to renew the attack the next day, but his captains were unanimously opposed. Keokuk sank during the night with no loss of life. 2 or 3 of the monitors had sustained damage that would keep them out for further days of would keep them out of action for days, if not weeks. And the captains agreed that nothing good could come from prolonging the battle.
Right.
Even if they could knock out Fort Sumter, the rest of the fortifications remained, and the fleet had not penetrated the first defensive ring at all. So they're like, dude, you think this is it? They got worse when we go in.
Right. Thus, the battle had fizzled out. The Union had lost 1 ironclad, and Fort Sumter had sustained damage that could be repaired in short order, though it was somewhat more than DuPont realized. Personnel casualties were quite low, despite the volume of fire. Only 1 man, Quartermaster Edward Cobb of Nahant, was killed in the fleet, and 21 others sustained various degrees of injury. The rebels had lost 5 killed and 8 wounded.
Wow. Secretary of the Navy, Wells, was dismayed by the failure. Small casualty list, coupled with DuPont's evident reluctance beforehand, led him to believe that the first attack was not pressed with vigor.
Right.
His criticism softened only when John Rogers, who was known to be a thoroughly competent and aggressive officer, sided with DuPont. As Rogers saw it, and as Wells had to agree, Charleston could not be taken by a purely naval assault.
Right.
It would require a combined operation with full cooperation of both services to achieve it. And the Army doesn't like the Navy, so...
Well, they're going to have to work with each other, man.
Depends on how important Charleston really is.
Wells saw that DuPont was correct in stating that Charleston could not be taken by naval forces alone, but the breach between the 2 men were irreparable. Wells recalled the Admiral on June 3rd, replacing him at first with Rear Admiral Andrew H. Foote. Foote, however, had never fully recovered from a wound he had received during the Battle of Fort Donelson, and he died before he could report to his new station.
Damn.
Wells, therefore, somewhat reluctantly turned responsibility for a naval portion of the command to the campaign to Rear Admiral John A. Dahlgren. All right, Dahlgren.
All right, see what you got. Well, DuPont's captains fared better than he, and none of them suffered professionally for their participation in the failed campaign. 7 of them, John and CRP Rogers, Amen, Fairfax, Turner, Warden, and Rhine, eventually became rear admirals. Drayton was appointed chief of the Bureau of Navigation, which would have made him a rear admiral, but he died of a heart attack while awaiting Senate confirmation.
Oh, jeez.
George W. Rogers, known as one of the best captains in the fleet, but he was killed in a later attack on Charleston.
Wow.
So, damn.
The Monitors and New Ironsides continued to take part in the blockade of Charleston that remained in force. But the former never again inspired such awe among the rebels as they had before the attack.
Damn.
All were used in the continuing campaign against the city. Even the sunken Keokuk continued to figure in the war. She had sunk in shallow water that left her smokestack above the surface, so her position was very well known. Adolphus W. Lacoste, a Charleston civilian hired by the Confederate government, was able to salvage the 2 11-inch guns for the wreck. Oh, look at that. Does he give them to the Confederates?
I would assume so, since he was hired by the Confederates.
He was like, no, they're mine. I got them.
Well, I don't think he could hold them here.
He and his crew worked by night and were able to escape notice of the blockaders. DuPont did not suspect their activity until it was announced in the Charleston Mercury. They're like, what? Under our noses?
But what the hell? Who didn't knock down the smokestack anyways, you idiots?
Right.
Jeez. Another fucking, Union fail. I mean, jeez, dude.
Sad news.
This Wells guy that's the Secretary of War, he sucks.
He's kind of gay.
He needs to get replaced.
He's a Secretary of Navy.
He's a Secretary of fucking dicks in his mouth.
Right.
The first Battle of Franklin, our last battle of the day, was fought April 10th, 1863 in Williamson County, Tennessee. The engagement at Franklin was a reconnaissance in force by Confederate cavalry leader Major General Earl Van Dorn, coupled with an equally inept response by Union Major General Gordon Granger. Van Dorn advanced northward from Spring Hill, Tennessee, on April 10th, making contact with Federal skirmishers just outside of Franklin. His attack was so weak that when Granger received a false report that Brentwood to the north was under attack, he believed it, sent most of his cavalry northward, thinking that Van Dorn was undertaking a diversion. And Van Dorn couldn't capitalize, apparently, huh?
I guess not. When the truth became known, there was no threat to Brentwood. Granger decided to attack Van Dorn, but was surprised to learn that the subordinate had already done so. He's like,
Granger, you're a bitch.
He's like, what the hell? I didn't give anybody orders. Brigadier General David S. Stanley was like, you know what? I got the 4th U.S. Cavalry over here.
Right.
I'm going to cross the Harpeth River at Hughes Ford behind the Confederate right rear. Stanley attacked and captured Freeman's Tennessee Battery on the Lewisburg Road.
Wow.
Lost it when Brigadier General Nathan Bedford Forrest counterattacked. He's like, oh, hold on.
Oh, wait a minute.
Hold on. This incident in his rear caused Van Dorn to cancel his operations and withdraw to Spring Hill, leaving the Federals in control of the area. He got scared.
Right.
Fort Granger, named after Gordon Granger, is located in Franklin in Pinkerton Park on Murfreesboro Road.
Very good for them, huh? Well, a nice little nothing battle right there.
Right.
Literally nothing happened. And that's going to do it for this episode. We are, like I said, 3 episodes away from Chancellorsville, a big battle. But before then, next week we'll have the Siege of Suffolk, Fort Bisland, Irish Bend, and the Vermilion Bayou.
Okay.
Another 4 battles. Then we'll have another 4 battles the episode after that. Before we get into the very, 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 very long and detailed Battle of Chancellorsville. That's going to be a pretty decent long one.
Detailed and long.
Yeah, that's our next upcoming schedule. If you listen to this on the free podcast version, we also do it in video with no ads and at least 2 days early released before the free version. So, go to patreon.com/bangdang, $2 a month for this show, Battles of the American, Outlaws and Gunslingers, and This Week in Sports History, all in video, all ad-free and early, plus you get your own RSS feed if you want to plug it into any one of your favorite podcast apps. Go check out our YouTube at Bang Dang Network, where we post little clips and little shorts, and also we started posting a little dart season we got going on there, so, just hanging out, shooting the shit, shooting the darts, and Dang's getting dominated every day of the week. So go check that out if you guys like darts. And
you guys know better than that.
Random fun conversations about anything. So that'll be it for us on this one. We'll be back for Siege of Suffolk, Bisland, Irish Bend, and Vermilion Bayou. We are the Monthly Michiganders with
Dang dang.